Hello, Leafs fans. What a crazy couple of weeks it's been. So, um, things are getting very interesting. Trade deadline just passed. Playoffs are a little over six weeks away. Um, and the blood's starting to boil a little bit. I'm getting excited. I can't wait for the playoffs. Weather in Toronto is getting good. Cheers. I can't wait to get the Toronto Maple Leafs merchandise up outside the house. Big flag pole. It's time to get the flags on the cars and get the playoff juices running. But before we talk about that, um, let's review some of the games. Um, you know, uh, this week and last week, and talk about Sheldon Keefe and his coaching decisions. Very frustrating, very infuriating, very maddening. I can't get over this guy. And then we'll talk about the trade deadline and the acquisitions and how everything fits in. Um, so first, you know, looking, let's say, as of March 3rd, which was Saturday versus the Rangers. The Leafs played the Rangers on Saturday, Bruins on Monday, Sabres on Wednesday, Bruins on Thursday again, and then they just recently on Saturday they played the Montreal Canadiens. Now, 5 games, 3 wins, 2 losses. It's not a coincidence that the 3 wins were Samsonov and the 2 losses were Wall. I think this is when you want to judge Sheldon Keefe as the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs throughout his entire tenure. I think this past these past 5 games is basically Sheldon Keefe in a nutshell. Overthinking, not smart. He outthinks himself before the coach on the other team has a chance to outthink him. Joseph Wall hasn't played in 2 months. He's coming off a high ankle injury, which is a very tough injury to deal with, even though you get healthy enough to play. All the players who have sustained high ankle injuries always say that you don't feel you're like yourself, until 6 months to a year afterwards. And some people say it's been a couple of years and my ankle doesn't feel the same. So this guy, this goalie, comes back from this injury, and everyone's very excited, as they should be. He's most probably the goalie of the future. Very high ceiling, super talented. So you would think you'd want to shelter him a little bit when he comes back from injury, not just throw him to the wolves, which Sheldon Keefe did. He plays Wool twice versus the Bruins, and then Samsonov beats Samsonov beats Vegas, Colorado, the New York Rangers, and he's 11-2 in his last 13 games. His save percentage is over 910. His goals against is under 3. The guy's doing everything you want him to do, and as soon as Wool is available, they say, okay, sit down. We're going to play Wool in the 2 most important games to date against the Bruins, which were, only like 6 points back of when they played for the first time on Monday. So, they win that game. They're 4 points back. They have 2 games in hand. They play them again later in the week. You could see where there's a scenario where the Leafs might actually catch the Boston Bruins and then maybe even get home ice in the first round versus the Bruins. But Sheldon Keefe just says, "Oh, I'm going to put Wall in that." Based on what? Where is the merit in putting Joseph Wall in net? Samsonov is busting his ass and he's getting great results against good teams and he's winning. And then you tell him when the most important game comes up, we're just going to play in the guy that hasn't played in 2 months. And guess what? He gets shelled. They lose both games 4-1. It doesn't make any sense the way Sheldon Keefe makes decisions. No way anybody higher than him told them you have to start Wall in these 2 games. It makes zero sense. Wall should play against the Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens. It makes sense. You want to bring him back, give him a couple of games, get him some wins, make him feel good about himself, let him get his technique, timing, and everything back. Not just throw him to the Boston Bruins. And, considering how the Leafs really played against the Bruins, other than, just smacking them around and punching them in the face and, Marchand turtling all night. I mean, they put the wrong goalie in net, and Woll gave up some really soft goals in games where the points were really important, and it makes zero sense. And that's the very epitome, like in Sheldon Keefe in a nutshell. He outthinks himself. He doesn't have the confidence to go with the best player at the time, and that's why he's going to get fired this summer. And the Leafs are finally going to get a coach to I don't think he's the right guy to coach the team the way it's been restructured anyways. Like the Leafs are Tree Living is building a completely different team. The philosophy in Toronto is going to completely change, and they're going to have a brand new identity come next season, whether you notice it or not already. The Leafs are a lot scrappier. They're a lot tougher. They got a bunch of guys who can hold their own weight. Benoit, can drop gloves. McCabe can drop gloves. Reeves obviously can drop gloves. Then now you have Edmondson, you have Labushkin, and we all saw Tyler Tabuzi. I'm just gonna take a break and take a sip right now. Tyler Bertuzzi beat the ever-loving crap out of the Boston Bruins player in that fight. And you saw Max Domi going after Marchand, and he turtled. If see, here's how it works in the NHL, and Leaf fans really do this to themselves. If the Leafs had a captain of the type of player that Marchand is, a rat, one of the biggest losers in the NHL. I don't care how many points he's scored. He's one of the biggest losers in the NHL, and he's had Zdeno Chara and Bergeron protect him his entire career. Now that they're not there, he wants to do kind of the same things, but when it comes time to pay up, every single time this guy plays the Leafs, he hurts somebody. Whether it's Liljegren with the slew foot, or he accidentally on purpose concusses Nigel. The guy hurts a player every single time he plays the Leafs, and the refs will not hold him accountable. They always give him the benefit of the doubt. But the problem is, when you do that stuff, someone's going to come and grab your collar and be like, hey, you need to stop running around out here. And when they do that, he turtles because he can't fight. He's a loser. He's a wimp. He's soft as hell. If the Bruins, the way the Bruins turtled versus the Leafs have done that before. And this fan base has called them soft. Everybody in the NHL, a million names for the Toronto Maple Leafs. What the Bruins did, nobody calls them soft. I don't know how you don't call them soft. They didn't want any part of anything all night. And the one guy who did take a fight against Bertuzzi got the ever-loving crap beat out of him. So the Leafs are completely being rebuilt. I like the way Tree Living is doing it. The Leafs have tried it one way for a lot of years. The Leafs have tried to be skilled, tried to be fast, tried to be talented. Puck-moving defensemen, Eric Gustafsson, Sandin, Riley, Liljegren, all these guys. It hasn't worked, right? But we always hear about, the big, strong, tough defenses like Vegas and blah, 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 blah. So now the Leafs are built different. And Sheldon Keefe isn't the right coach to coach this team, and it's very obvious by the decisions he makes. Sits Benoit out in his hometown of Montreal on Saturday is a punk move. I know you want Edmondson in. You could easily sit Brody, who's having a horrible month, and play Benoit, and no one's going to say anything, right? At the end of the day, that's just the way Keefe is. Keefe uh, can barely manage a fast offensive roster, but he definitely can't coach this kind of roster. He doesn't. The team has zero structure. They don't know what they're doing defensively. Now that the team is built like this, you got to go out and get a Gallant, or there's a lot of coaches out there who could better coach this team. With the way that it's built currently and the way their defense is built. I mean, you got a lot of players who play gritty, who play tough, who hit, who open up space, and it's going to allow the goal scorers, the talent, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, and Riley to go out there and do what they do with a little bit more space, knowing that the forecheck is coming. Connor Dewar is the type of player that's going to forecheck hard. He's going to hit. He's going to penalty kill. Edmondson is going to come and he's going to chop you down. He's the cross check king. We've all seen it. We've all seen him, what he can do in the playoffs when the Montreal Canadiens played the Leafs in the first round. Edmondson was all over guys like Wayne Simmons, cross checking him in the neck and the chest. Like, those guys couldn't do what they do, and it's because of guys like Edmondson that they got completely shut down. And that's what you got to do in the playoffs, right? So, yeah, just in terms of the results in the games, the Leafs are not doing too bad. They beat a lot of good teams recently, but they haven't looked super great last week, just because with the flu and all the stuff that's going on with the team, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of energy, and they're not really, the passes aren't crisp. They're not shooting great. Tavares gets one off the shin. That's the game winner in Montreal. And although, Matthews scored a pretty nice goal versus the Buffalo Sabres in overtime, but they definitely didn't have it this week. You can tell they didn't have it this week by the way they skated. They just looked slow. Passes weren't good. They were discombobulated all over the ice. A lot of that usually has to do with Sheldon Keefe and the way he coaches and his systems. But definitely the flu hurt them. So these couple of days that they have off, they don't play. They don't play until Thursday this week. So they have a couple of days to practice, get the new guys acclimated to the team through practice, get everyone healthy, get over the flu, and Thursday in Philadelphia, I think we're going to see a much better version of the Maple Leafs in terms of speeds and just being able to score off the rush. I think they're going to just look faster. And I mean, the lines, the way they're currently constructed, another issue with Sheldon Keefe right here is, like, he creates this line of Max Domi, Bertuzzi, and Nylander, and even though, the offense is better from that line, they get completely caved in every single time they're out there. Like, as soon as they get hemmed in their own zone, defensive zone, Max Domi is not the center to be able to stop a cycle or hit somebody or knock somebody down, or he's not the type of centerman to be able to do that. So they just get hemmed in their own zone for their entire shift. And then, you got Tavares coming out with McMahon and Yarncrook trying to do something, which that line has looked better, but I think in general, Tavares and Yarncrook are a good combination. They just need to figure out who they're going to play with. Like I think Yarncrook with Nylander and Tavares is a pretty good line. They're going to produce offense. They know what they're doing defensively. Tavares is pretty good in his own zone. And now that you have Connor Dewar and Camp as your third and fourth centers, Max Domi comes off the center spot and he's a winger again. And all of a sudden, you have a lot more options, right? Domi as a winger is much better. He skates faster on the wing. He can make some plays. He can probably utilize his playmaking better. But that's just Sheldon Keefe in a nutshell. Like this guy has been the coach of this team for so many years, and he still can't figure out who's good with who. Like anybody who coaches the Edmonton Oilers knows, okay, I'm gonna start the game with Draisaitl and McDavid on different lines. If they play well and the team plays well and they score and everything is going okay, then they stay apart. But as soon as things go downhill, Draisaitl and McDavid are reunited, and Ryan Nugent Hopkins becomes their second line center. Hyman's on the top line, and then all of a sudden, bingo, bango, bongo, they got their offense going. Sheldon Keefe, after all these years, still doesn't know how to properly load up the top line. Like if the Leafs are down, if Marner and Matthews start the game together, where are you going to go after that? There is no place to go after that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's always made sense to me that that top line should be William Nylander on the left wing, Marner on the right wing, Matthews, and then you just with your speed, with your skill, you just hem teams in and cycle the way only Nylander can do. And then you make a couple of nice passes. Marner's capable of nice passes. Willie's capable of nice passes. Matthews can also move the puck. And then you got two bona fide shooters in Nylander and Matthews that can finish. And then it moves guys like Nyes down. Nyes has been moved down the lineup recently, and all of a sudden he goes on a different line where he doesn't always have to think about, I can't shoot. I have to get the puck to Marner or Matthews. They're the guys who make the world go around. I can't just be creating my own offense. I can't be selfish. I have to give the puck to them, and it kills his game. It completely kills his game. Sheldon Keefe should have realized that by now. This guy's been on the top line all season. Matthew Nyes has created nothing. But as soon as you put him a game with, you put him on a line with Domi, all of a sudden he busts out and scores some goals. And then he goes back on the top line, doesn't score, and then somebody gets hurt, and then he moves on a line with somebody else, and then all of a sudden he's playing good again. Like, guys like that need to have their own line. Like, Nyes with Tavares works because Tavares is not the guy that you have to defer to. It's like, oh, I have to give Tavares the puck. He's the shooter. It's not like him, Yarncrook, and McMahon work well because you have three guys that are shooters. McMahon's a shooter, Tavares is a shooter, and Yarncrook is a shooter. And what they do is they get the puck in, they forecheck, they're gritty, they get on the puck, they turn it over, and any one of those guys can rip the puck in the net, and that's why that works. And Nyes, all of a sudden, you move him onto a different line with McMahon, and we saw, just in the last game, how much chemistry guys like McMahon and Nyes had chemistry. So, like, maybe Connor Dewar is the center there. He has more goals than Camp this season. He can score. I've seen his highlights. He's a pretty smart player with the puck. He dogs it, he chases it, he gets it back, and he doesn't hesitate to rip it. But if you want to put Max Domi in the center there, then at least Nyes and McMahon are big boys who can go in there and get the puck. And then you have two shooters with Domi. I mean, Sitting at home and watching these games, and just watching the way this team is built and how underutilized some players are. It boggles my mind that this guy's still a coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's made so many bad decisions, not just you know just by luck. With Samsonov playing bad and Woll being hurt, like Sheldon Keefe was forced to play Jones, and then so Jones was good, and then Jones didn't play. Samsonov came back. He played well, so Samsonov was playing all the games. Keefe didn't have any decisions to make. But as soon as Woll comes back and he has decisions to make, he screws it up instantly in the first week. Why the hell would you throw Woll to the Wolves against the Boston Bruins and let Samsonov play two easy games like the Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why you wouldn't let the kid just get a couple of games to get his, timing, rhythm, get some confidence. And then next week, you got Philadelphia, you got Carolina, then you got Philadelphia again, and with Washington on a back-to-back. Like, there's the Edmonton Oilers coming up. You give Woll some time, and then you put him in those games if you feel like he's just the better option. But I mean, it is what it is. The results are not bad, despite Sheldon Keefe's incompetence. But Tree Living to me is doing a great job. Like I didn't know if Tree Living was going to wait until the summer to really remake this team into the team that he likes, which is big, strong, aggressive players. And he didn't. He didn't wait. He went into the trade deadline and he acquired the type of players he likes, and he's telling us, the fan base, what this team is going to be about, what their identity is, who they're going to be, how they're going to play in the years to come. And I like it. Like, how many times can you go into the playoffs with these like smallerish, skilled, puck moving D men that just get knocked off the puck, and then the other team starts cycling in your zone, whether it's Florida, Boston, Tampa, whoever it is, and you can't break up the cycle because it's Lilligren, because it's Sandin, because it's Riley, right? All of a sudden, you need McCabe, you need Benoit, you need Edmondson, you need Labushkin, you need these guys who are just gonna pick one guy and just run him into the boards, and all of a sudden that guy's on his ass, and there's one less guy on the ice to cycle the puck, and then the cycle stops. Like, you need that in the playoffs. The playoffs is a completely different thing. Whether these guys look good in the regular season or not is completely irrelevant. In the playoffs, you know, uh, on average, in the playoffs, penalties get called more. You need penalty killing. Edmondson, Labushkin, these guys kill penalties. Dewar is a penalty killer, and so is Kampf. And then now you have Yarncrook back, so he's a penalty killer, and all of a sudden your PK squad looks much better. But I think the last straw for Tree Living was when he signed Klingberg, which was the problem. The problem with Klingberg was the fans in Toronto never got to see him healthy and what he can do. I think if he was perfectly healthy and he had no issues, he'd easily be a 40 point D man for the Leafs. Just exactly like Riley, but just bigger with a longer wingspan. He would move the puck well. He'd be great on the power play. He's got a very sneaky, lethal shot from the point, which would help because the Leafs don't have any defenseman that can take a slap shot from the point, especially on the power play, which makes them way more predictable. And like I just, it's they tried to go for you know Klingberg was like a 50-50. The organization wanted an offensive type mover, and that's what Klingberg was. But Tree Living wanted somebody who was bigger, with a longer wingspan that could, that had a pretty good stick that can break up passes. And if he had to run into somebody, you know, he'd be able to hold his own, and that's why Klingberg was the signing over guys like Matt Dumba or whatever. But it's a shame that we didn't get to see Klingberg play in Toronto healthy, because I think within this roster, he would have been like just a bigger, taller version of Morgan Riley, to be honest with you. So the Leafs didn't spend too much in assets. I know people are saying, well, you traded all these picks, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth rounders. At the end of the day, these guys, regardless of who you drafted, were going to be 3 to 5 years away from playing in the NHL, and the Leafs need help now. And True Living is telling us what this team is going to be like. And we've tried the other philosophy of the analytic darlings, guys with good puck possession and underlying and Corsi and all this other stuff. And you can't make a team that way, right? Like it just doesn't work. The Leafs have looked soft. Their offense is completely dried up, because those type of players, when you have only those type of players, when you go into the playoffs and the time and space gets reduced, everyone's on you, and you're just, you're getting bombarded all the time, and Matthews gets bombarded, and there's no deterrent to keep people off of Matthews. But now you have defensemen out there, and wingers out there, and people out there that are willing to go smash somebody because they're hacking and slashing at Matthews, right? There is a deterrent. Guys like Bertuzzi and Reeves and Dewar and the defensemen will go there and they'll hit you hard on the ice. And it's like, hey, you know, stop hitting our guy and we'll stop hitting you. And it creates more time and space for our superstars in the playoffs to do the kind of things that they do in the regular season when they have that time and space. That doesn't exist in the playoffs. So it's I'm very interested to see how this team stacks up versus the Boston Bruins in the first round, and it's most probably going to be the Boston Bruins. I don't see the Bruins catching Florida, or the teams below the Leafs catching them. So it's going to be Toronto, Boston, and you know there's going to be a lot of dirty stuff. Somebody always gets hurt when Marchand's on the ice, and I think based on the last game, and then you saw the way Boston reacted on Friday at the trade deadline when they acquired Patrick Maroon, because they literally got smacked around all over the place, and their captain, who should have had some pushback, turtled all night. And it's like, oh my God, we got to go get somebody. So putting Patrick Maroon on the fourth line for the Boston Bruins makes them weaker, makes them worse. And that's what Tree Living did. He made the Boston Bruins go out and make a move to make them slower, weaker, and worse. And all of a sudden, you just created an advantage for yourself just because you pushed around the Boston Bruins, right? For the Boston Bruins players to celebrate their Stanley Cup team, and have those guys in the building, and then watch the way they cowered, it's not a good look for the captain. It's not a good look for Marchand. It's not a good look for the team. And then all of a sudden, the fans are like, "Oh, is this team soft all of a sudden?" When they've never been, because they've had the Dano Chara's, the mutant out there at 6'7", 6'8", whatever he was, patrolling. He just, guys like Marchand had so much protection, and now they don't have it anymore, and all of a sudden they look very soft. So because of Tree Living's uh, kind of philosophy on how teams should be built and how they should play, they created an advantage. Boston had to react and make their team worse, and that's all you're looking for. You're looking for a GM that's smart enough to create an advantage Boston Bruins don't know how to react. They go and trade for Patrick Maroon, give up an asset for a guy who's going to make them slower and weaker. And Patrick Maroon, we saw what he was versus the Leafs when the Leafs had Luke Shen and O'Reilly and all these guys on the team. Patrick Maroon was relevant. He wasn't part of that series at all. If Patrick Maroon got out of hand, Luke Shen would just stand there and start punching him in the face. And what was Patrick Maroon going to do? So now we got Edmondson, Lyubushkin, Reeves, Benoit, McCabe. What's Patrick Maroon going to do? Right? They made a trade for nothing, only because they were scared and it was a bad look at home in front of their home fans. So, as a fan, regardless of what the price was, I like the philosophy of the GM, and I like what they made the Boston Bruins do. Like, that's all you hear is you got to be big, strong, and you got to have depth in the playoffs. And the Leafs are moving the needle towards away from smallish, faster, talented players. But those guys, if you don't have the size to play in the playoffs, I mean, we've seen it for years, right? We've seen it for years, and whether it's been Tampa or Boston, not all their defensemen are super fast and talented. Sometimes they have old guys like Shattenkirk or Bogosian or Shen or, like they have Dmitry Orlov on Boston. Like sometimes they have older, bigger, slower defensemen that are more effective at that time of year because that's just the way the game is played in the playoffs. And until that changes, your philosophy has to go towards what works. And what works in the NHL has been tried, tested, and true over 100 years. So there's not really much you can do. You hope that if your team is skilled enough and fast enough that maybe you can do something around bigger, slower D-men that are clobbering, but no one's been able to break that formula. So it is what it is. It's going to be interesting to see because Keefe is going to constantly tinker with the lineup. He's not going to make the right decision. Come playoff time, he's definitely not going to make the right decision with who should be in net. Regardless of how Woll plays, it's got to be Samsonov's net right now. Joseph Woll has to show a lot to pass Samsonov right now. I mean, 11 and 2 and 13, 9-11 save percentage, 278 goals against. His numbers are really good, and he's beating quality teams like Vegas, Colorado, Rangers. Let's he's definitely put the BS behind him, and I think the fans need to forget about the BS and just focus on who he is now, how he's playing now. And those are two tough games against the Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens, where the Leafs weren't looking great, they weren't playing great. They definitely have injuries and the flu going around on most of those guys. But they were able to get it done because he made the saves when he needed to, right? He really saved the Leafs behind in overtime versus the New York Rangers. Like some of those saves that he made, like especially on Panarin in overtime when, he just slides sideways, drops his stick, and just tries to get everything out there in front of the puck to try to save it, and he did. I mean, the guy's trying, right? Like, whether he's the greatest or not, he definitely isn't the greatest, but, whatever he is, he's leaving it all out there. He's trying his hardest. He's playing his best. All we ever ask for is, heart and determination and grit and all these things. And Ilya Samsonov is he's playing his butt off. Like, this guy needs a contract next year with the Leafs or whoever it is. Might not even be with the Leafs, but the guy's got a family. He's an NHL goalie. He's putting up decent stats. And, the Leafs are not the greatest defensive team this year. They've been through all sorts of defensive combinations with the amount of injuries and suspensions and blah 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 blah. Like Leafs defense hasn't been great at all, but um, he had to figure it out to play within the system. And now that he has, he's putting up good numbers. Most goalies in the defensive structure of the Leafs, which there pretty much is none. It's the wild wild west when the Leafs are in their own zone. I couldn't imagine a lot of goalies putting up crazy stats in within this defensive structure, right? Like I see a guy in Vasilevsky in Tampa. His numbers aren't good this year, and Tampa's much better defensively than the Leafs. You see a guy like Shesterkin, who until recently, wasn't playing well. His numbers weren't good. Quick had to carry the New York Rangers. So like it's like yeah, there's a lot of great goalies out there, but all goalies lose it from time to time, and then it's all about the ability to get it back, rein it back in, and start playing well. Obviously, consistency being the most important thing in hockey, and it's very hard to be consistent through 82 games when there is the flu, there's injuries, whatever. Like the best players on your defense might get hurt, and all of a sudden you're giving up 10 more shots a game than you were used to. Then your penalty killers might get hurt, and then all of a sudden you're weaker on the penalty kill, one timers flying from everywhere. And now that the top echelon teams like the Bruins, the Oilers, the Leafs, they've all figured out, one guy has to go on a flank, and if you feed him at the right time, that one timer is going in every single time. All the goalie's doing when he's looking at the top of the point is which way is it going to go and who's going to rip this one timer at me. Meanwhile, he's got to front the guy in front of him and look at try to find the puck that might be coming towards him. It's a tough job as a goalie. I think in general, people are a little too harsh on goalies in Toronto, but you know, Joe Wall shouldn't be handed anything. I think Samsonov is playing his butt off, and kudos to him. That's all you can ask for is go out there, throw everything at the puck, try to stop as many as you can, and he's doing just that. So he's doing good now. For now, let's see how it goes. But until Joseph Wall starts playing like how Samsonov is now, you can't give him the net game one in the playoffs. And I think we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 weeks left in the season, and the playoffs start in 7. We're almost there. It's only a little bit of tinkering left, but in general, I'm very positive with how this team is shaping up. I like the philosophy of how Tree Living is starting to build this team, and I think he's just going to continue in the off season. He didn't have any time last year. By the time he got hired, and there was the draft, and all of a sudden there was free agency in Austin Matthews and William Nylander. So I don't think he had a lot of time to do the things he wanted to do, but he didn't waste any time during the trade deadline. And I'm pretty excited with the way the team is going. The team is by puck drop, by the first game of next season, by the time the puck drops on the first game of next season, the Leafs are going to have a definitive identity, which they haven't had under Kyle Dubas. And that identity is going to be, we're going to punch you in the face almost every single night. We are going to punch you, and we're going to push you, and we're going to make it super tough. And once that message gets across the NHL, people are going to hate coming into Toronto, because right now under Kyle Dubas, other teams love coming into Toronto because it's the easiest night. They're not going to get pushed. They're not going to get hit. They're not going to get checked. The Leafs are not going to play crazy shutdown trap defense. They're going to give up a lot of chances, and it's 0.9 for the other team. And everybody comes in, and it's their Stanley Cup. It's the Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup if they win in Toronto. It's the Buffalo Sabres, the Boston Bruins, the Ottawa Senators, the Florida Panthers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Detroit Red Wings. Like all these guys come into Toronto, if they win, it's their Stanley Cup. We've seen it with the Winnipeg Jets, where they win one game and they're like, "Isn't it great to beat the Leafs, boys?" Like nobody regardless of what the Leafs schedule is, nobody plays the Leafs as hard every single night. Like Columbus doesn't get this treatment, Edmonton doesn't get this treatment, LA doesn't get this treatment, Winnipeg. Nobody in the NHL gets the treatment that the Leafs do, where every team that comes in that has a bunch of Ontario boys in it plays them so hard like it's their Stanley Cup. And the fact that the Leafs are continuously or perennially a 100-point team against that level of competition every single night, people take that for granted a lot in Toronto. People in Toronto, like most fans, like you don't have to have played hockey to understand this. Nobody gets played as hard as the Toronto Maple Leafs through 82 games. Like Drew Doughty from the LA Kings comes to Toronto, or Connor McDavid comes to Toronto. Toronto boys, right? Like all these guys are around the NHL. When they come to Toronto, they play the Leafs like it's their Stanley Cup. They got friends and family, and nobody gets played as hard as the Leafs do for 82 games. And that's why you see as many up and down results as the Leafs have, because they can sustain that level of intensity. But for the other guys, it's Boston Bruins play the Leafs 4 times, so they have to do that level of intensity is only 4 times a year. Ottawa Senators 4 times, Montreal Canadiens 4 times. Detroit is only twice, Edmonton is only once. Like the level of intensity they have to drum up, it's only a couple of times a year. Meanwhile, the Leafs have to face it every single night, regardless of it's going to be the Arizona Coyotes. They got Toronto boys and Ontario boys on that team, and they come in here and all of a sudden you're like, the Leafs haven't beat Arizona in 4 years at home. Then you start to understand why. Nobody gets played as hard as the Leafs do throughout 82 games. But that's just the way it goes. When you're the Mecca, that's just the way it goes. And we want it that way. I want it that way anyways. When the Leafs win and win it all, there's no excuses. So, that's our episode for this week. Hope maybe by Thursday or Friday I'll make another one. And we'll talk about what's going to happen with the game on Thursday and maybe game coming up on Saturday. Thank you for tuning in. As always, I appreciate you joining us. Like and subscribe if you like the podcast. I hope you participated in our giveaway on Facebook. 1K subscribers were, I can't believe we did it, right? Only, I think, beginning of the summer, we were at 500. So the numbers went up very quick. I'm very grateful for everybody. And like I promised, we're at 1K, we were going to do a giveaway, and we did. And everything was great. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you guys next week.